Welcome back. Among the many factors that influence the decision of investors to take their investment to any given country is the state of roads and infrastructure, among other things, of course. Now, according to a report from the National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan initiated by the National Planning Commission, about 68.3% of Nigeria's roads are in terrible disrepair. The report says 40% of the bad roads belong to the federal government, 78% to the state governments, and about 87% to the local governments. Now, the Senate, federal roads account for about 70% of traffic. Let me just quickly put that in there. Now, recently, the Senate, during plenary, declared a state of emergency on roads across the country, urging the federal government to undertake the immediate rehabilitation and dualization of some major highways and interstate roads across the country. And now that the prospects of the oil and gas industry have diminished significantly, and Nigeria is looking to agriculture, solid minerals, and other arms of the real sector to generate much needed revenue, the need to ensure cost-effective road construction and other infrastructure cannot be overstated. Devakumar Edwin, the Group Executive Director, Capital Projects and Portfolio Development at Dangote Cement, joins me now as we talk about how we can begin to improve road infrastructure in Nigeria. Good morning to you, and thank you so much for coming in.
Good morning, madam.
Well, just give us your assessment based on, all those figures that I've just reeled out. What's your impression of the roads in Nigeria?
Now, to begin with, if you see the real investment on the road infrastructure in Nigeria over the past several years have been quite low. You can compare to any developing countries, and what I'm talking about is in the real terms. If you look at the cost per kilometer which we are spending on the roads, it's extremely high. So if you see the real development in terms of kilometers of roads developed, it is extremely low. So if you have been continuously negligent in investing on the road infrastructure over a period of time, obviously we'll be in a bad shape. In fact, it's not just the roads. You have to look at the investment on airports, ports, roads, and electricity, the whole infrastructure. But primarily our focus today is on roads, and yes, the roads investment has been extremely low.
Why do you think that's happened? Because looking at the components of what we use here in Nigeria to construct our roads, it's mostly bitumen,
asphalt roads,
and asphalt roads. Yeah. Do you think which is sustainable, using bitumen and asphalt, or in this case, the reason why we're having this conversation is cement? Yeah,
I will highlight to you the features of the various options available. One is what we have been doing for a long time, the investment in asphalt roads. And the earlier, to begin with, all over the world, globally, it was asphalt road which was prevailing before concrete roads started coming in and started replacing the asphalt roads. Initially, about 5 decades back, when the concrete roads started coming in, the capital intensiveness was very high, so people were still continuing with asphalt roads. But today, apart from the basic advantage, today if you go for asphalt road, you have to have bitumen. Though we have a lot of bitumen, today bitumen is imported into Nigeria, draining your foreign exchange reserves and also costing us more money compared to cement, which used to be imported, but which is completely locally available, and the cement is even being exported. So the capital cost has come down. But leave aside Nigeria, I will take you through the global studies done in various countries, in South Africa, in Europe, in US. Especially in the US, a lot of studies have been conducted by federally funded resources and the various universities. And number one, the capital cost of a concrete road over a life cycle cost have been proved to be 30% less than asphalt roads. Apart from the fact that here we are going to use local cement and imported bitumen, which will even increase the capital cost of an asphalt road. Number two, the maintenance cost is 75% lower because the asphalt roads need a lot of maintenance. And number three, if you see the fuel cost, especially when you're going on highways, if you're using a concrete road, the fuel consumption will be about 20% less. So, like in a country like Nigeria, where we have one port and it's an predominantly import-dependent country, all the goods are hauled all over the place, and you can imagine with all the goods being hauled, 20% savings on fuel costs. So that is going to be very, very substantial. And number 4, safety. If you see, most of the times the vehicles, they lose control when they hit a pothole. So in concrete roads, you don't get potholes. Number 2, the traction or the road grip in a concrete road is far superior than in an asphalt road. So even in a wet road, when there is a rain, normally aquaplaning occurs, that is, the vehicle loses control and starts skidding. But in a concrete road, because of the better traction, the grip is better. So this skidding doesn't occur. So safety perspective too is going to be much better. Then the life of the roads. As per the federally funded studies, for the best laid asphalt roads, not the type what we are doing here, the best laid asphalt road vis-a-vis best laid concrete roads, first 30 years you don't need to do any repair on concrete road, whereas asphalt road, by the 15th year you will have to start repairing. And if you look at the life of a asphalt road, it has been deemed as 30 years, whereas a concrete road, the life is 75 years. So the 2.5 times the life. So, and then the load. One of the biggest problems is overloading. Even if you go to US today, and even some of our neighboring countries, Ghana and Senegal, most of the countries, they restrict the axle load. So they increase the life of the road. So, but if you go to concrete roads, there doesn't need to be any restriction because it can handle much higher loads. So in a country like Nigeria, where we have a tendency to overload goods, the life is much better.
So sorry to cut you there. Looking at what you've said now and listening to what you've said, would you suggest, for instance, now that the federal government has decided that they want to pay closer attention to that very critical infrastructure road, should the federal government, for instance, take up this option of using cement to fix the roads, or should the state governments, because we have about 78% of these roads owned by the state government and 87% owned by the local government?
See, ultimately, there are roads under the control of, as rightly pointed out, under the state, roads under the control of federal government. Each of them have their own capital budget. Each of them spend on their own roads, which happens universally. Any country you go, they have this division of responsibilities. And ultimately, what it boils down to is whoever is investing money on a road should invest the capital money, budget what they have in a wise way, in a way in which it's going to give them better returns. So obviously the solution is concrete roads. Especially cities, for example, the reflectance value of the concrete road is much better because they are much brighter than an asphalt road which absorbs the light. So in a city like Lagos, if you have concrete roads, even the energy consumption on street lights comes down substantially. So there are a lot of advantages. I can just keep on going. You struck me through because there are so many advantages.
How is Dangote Cement going to actually ensure that these advantages are properly taken care of?
In fact, we even formed a joint venture construction company with Andrade Gutierrez of Brazil, primarily to focus upon road infrastructure. And so we ourselves have volunteered that, okay, if you have an issue of funding, we can go and invest. We can do the concrete roads for you. And we have huge investments in Nigeria with huge tax liabilities. It could be offset against our tax liabilities. So we can go build and transfer. So we don't own the roads. We build and transfer it back to the government. And you can offset the capital expense against the taxes. So we have come up with some unique proposals. We are in discussions with the previous government. We'll go back to the current government.
So let's look at the cost-benefit analysis that Dangote Cement is going to be looking at with regards whether it's with the state government, whether it's with the federal government.
Yeah, ultimately the beneficiary is the government, which government means is the people, because the people's money is collected in the form of taxes. How are you going to use it? Are you going to use it in a way which is going to be much more expensive and last much lesser? When you talk about the life, okay, it's not only the capital cost ultimately in the life cycle which is going to be higher with concrete roads, less with concrete roads, but the fact that so many repairs occur with the asphalt road, you can imagine there's so much of go-slows happen in Lagos many times when you start repairing the roads. Either you don't repair, and once there is a rain, because of a pothole, everybody slows down and there is a traffic jam all over Lagos city, for example. And if they want to repair, they have to frequently repair, causing disturbance to the people. So even in terms of traffic flow, it is much better.
Yeah, but then you see, it's one thing for us to want to have good roads, and another thing for us to reduce the traffic that we have on these roads, at least for federal government roads. According to this report, about 70% of traffic is actually seen on those federal government roads. And so, yes, we want good roads, but more and more, we should begin to turn our attention to other aspects with regards, developing other aspects of infrastructure. So what is Dangote actually going to be doing in that regard?
If you want to reduce the road traffic on roads, the only other form is rail transportation, which is what happens in most of the countries. Bulk of the goods cargo movement is done through rails. And I think in the previous government time, they have spent some money and they activated some rail lines, but we have to test the lines and they effectively utilize. That's the only way you can reduce the traffic on the roads.
So Dangote Cement is actually now telling us that they are in business and ready to help us to fix our roads.
Sure, because even for rail, you need cement concrete, because all the sleepers along the railway track is made of concrete. And the bridges and culverts have to be made of concrete. And the roads is concrete. So the solution is available, because in the past, the cement used to be extremely expensive. We were an imported dependent country on cement. And there was, when we started the cement manufacturing, we first started our terminal in the year 2000. Before that, the local production was about 3.5 million tons of cement. The rest was all imported. Today, we ourselves are targeting to export about 3.5 million tons of cement. So the cement prices have come down. If you see in dollar terms, between what was 15 years back and today, it is more or less, it has come down by more than 40%. So the effective prices have come down, and it's a better solution.
So it's cost effective, it's safer, it's it has more advantages anyway.
Yeah, energy efficient, because fuel consumption is less, life reflectance value is better, safety, operating expenses, capital expenses, both are low, and it can carry a lot of load. So if you carry more load, obviously then the number of trips your vehicle has to make becomes less, because if I have to move 200 tons, whether I'm going to make 7 trips or 4 trips or 5 trips, it matters a lot.
That's definitely one thing we're going to be keeping our eye on. But thank you so much, Edwin, for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you very much, madam.
Edwin Devakumar is the Group Executive Director, Capital Projects and Portfolio Development at Dangote Cement.